Yes, yes, absolutely.
Oyez, hear ye, hear ye. The court is now in session. I'll be announcing today. So today's service is brought to you by the Outreach Committee with fantastic technical help from many people. Christine, Jim, I believe Eric had a lot to do with it, and others. So congratulations on that. It's a complex business in times of COVID. Welcome to this World Food Day service. A few words on the life and work of the congregation. All of this, of course, is found in midweek message and elsewhere. If you're not online or getting that email, please sign up. Just go to Emerging Waters website and away you go. Tomorrow at noon, you can join an interfaith group at St. James Square to pressure our government to address the climate crisis as we lead up to week-long COP26 meetings in Glasgow kicking off on Halloween, October 31st, and the following week. The action is entitled Phase 4 Climate Justice. You're encouraged to show your religious affiliation by how you dress and through any religious symbols you have. All current health measures will be followed. That's tomorrow at noon. Next Sunday, October 24th, Sunday of Grace service will be led by Reverend Lisa Beyer-DeLiver, guest pastor. And I believe that's here in person. Can somebody? Yeah, here in person, and I believe streamed. Photos. Some of you people are avid photographers. In the day of cell phones, everybody can be a surprisingly good photographer. All Saints Day, hang on just a second. Yeah, the All Saints Day service, October 31st in 2 weeks. We'd like to recognize anyone dear to you who may have passed away in the last year. Send in the name, year born, and the photo by noon a week next Wednesday. Also, there's a little photo competition going on here. Pictures of your surroundings and life during COVID last summer. Lots of detail on that in the midweek message. And photos are submitted to an easy-to-remember email address, which is emergingwatersphoto@gmail.com. The deadline is next Friday, and we're looking for some more great photos of last summer. So the COVID pandemic is stressful for everyone. It's easy to forget that the impact is not evenly spread throughout Canadian society and beyond. Many of us have been totally spared the worst of the pandemic, so this is a great time to consider taking action locally and in the larger society and even internationally. Here are some of the items that caught my attention. UT24 is open, so they're looking for all manner of contributions you can make to that. June is up and running with her great team. Gentle Hatha Yoga here Tuesday nights with Bryson, who joined us today. Think about that. Recycle your prescription bottles. Now that's a unique offer that people here in the congregation have taken on. They're reused. Lynn Thompson's beautiful handmade cards are still on offer. Contributions support the church. West Island Citizen Advocacy and the Cancer Wellness Center. The latter needs compassionate bilingual volunteers. Support the local food banks, and a great Nova fundraiser coming up, spaghetti dinner next Sunday in support of volunteer accompaniment services. So lots of great stuff happening. Internationally, our music and, mission, I have my prejudices. Mission and service, Haiti, are up there on the list. $25 contributions to purchasing COVID vaccines for third world use. A lot of really worthy causes. So if you'd please join me in acknowledging the traditional territory. I think that would be covering behind me. No, yes, maybe. I will read it. For thousands of years, First Nations people have walked on this land. Their relationship with the land is at the center of their lives and spirituality. We are gathered on the traditional territory of the Mohawk and acknowledge their stewardship of this land through the ages. What might I have forgotten? There are a couple of hymns. As a choir member, I'm looking forward to that. but you don't have a hymnary to check, so you have to hum along behind your masks, I'm sorry to say. It'll give you some pleasure, and we'll listen to the humming. Right now we have the musical century, the song of praise to the Maker, with Michael and Jim Klass.
Good morning and welcome to this World Food Day service. World Food Day was founded by the United Nations, the Food and Agriculture Organization, to increase awareness of world hunger and poverty and inspire solutions of world change. And every year there is a different theme, and we in the United Church do our best to pass along the message. And as part of that message, you can contribute to local food banks through Canada Helps, and St. Columba House also has a hunger appeal that you can contribute to directly. We all, humanity, face a great challenge in the 21st century in determining how to best feed the world's population on a warmer and more crowded planet. There is increasing competition for the use of land, water, and energy in combination with increased consumption of animal products, and the planet is limited in how much more food can be produced. Sadly, the way we produce, consume, and waste food exacts a heavy toll on our planet, putting incredible pressure on natural resources and the environment and contributing in a very negative way to climate change. Our food production systems in general, although not always, as you will hear, require massive amounts of fertilization and pesticides, which too often degrade or destroy natural habitats. The way the world produces food also exposes profound inequalities and injustices in our global society. 3 billion people cannot afford healthy diets. Before church last Sunday, I heard an interesting interview with an English farmer called James Rebanks, who has just written a book called Pastoral Song. He talked about how his grandfather farmed the land that he and his family are now farming, how his grandfather's farm was a mixture of animals and crops and fruit trees, and how, when his father took the farm over, the equipment became larger and more expensive, and the crops required more fertilizer and pesticides. He talked about how such conventional farming was a trap. Farmers became trapped in a cycle that is degrading the soil. Even though they're working long hours, they barely break even financially. And he talked about how he, as the latest generation to farm the land, was doing things differently, planting the trees that had been removed, using practices that built the soil, and teaching his children these old, new ways. He also talked about how we, the shoppers, need to care about what we buy and what we eat. We need to care about where our food comes from and how it's produced, because we, the shoppers, have a huge influence. The future of food is indeed in our hands. Hats off to Michael, who wrote a piece of music to go with some of James Rebanks's words, and you'll hear that piece during the offering. And hats off also to Sandy, who learned to sing it in a very short period of time. And back to food. So how do we get to a place where our food production is sustainable and does not continue to damage the planet? How can farmers feed everyone nutritious and safe foods available at an affordable price without paying an unforgivable environmental and social price? This is a difficult problem, to be sure. And during this service, we'll talk about some of the actions we can take that will help us reach that goal. So let's begin with our spiritual focus, which was written by David Suzuki, and you can say quietly your part in bold. The way we see the world shapes the way we treat it. If a mountain is a deity, not a pile of ore, if a river is one of the veins of the land, not potential irrigation water, if a forest is a sacred grove, not timber, if other species are our biological kin, not resources, or if the planet is our mother, not an opportunity, then we will treat each other with greater respect. This is the challenge, to look at the world from a different perspective. So I invite you now to hum along as Michael and Jim play Come Touch Our Heart.
Thank you, Helen. Where does your food come from? Why buy local? Some of you may know or remember that inspiring group of 5 young people, Renee, Reed, Emily, Dan, and Fred, who graduated from McDonald College in 2004 and started the 17-acre Ferme Tournesol growing organic food on a farm cooperative in Les Cèdres. Together, from a small operation which sold vegetables at our local Saturday market, they have now grown to provide weekly or bi-weekly baskets at 3 locations to over 700 families. They now have a seed division, growing and packing seed to distribute to gardeners, garden centers, and natural food stores in other provinces, as well as their online boutique. They are also known for their garlic, which I enjoy, and they share their expertise with other farmers and growers. Tournesol is trying to reduce their effect on the environment by increasing the amount of renewable energy they use, including switching from a gas-powered truck to an electric truck. And they now have grown considerably. There are now 7 partners, and they employ another 8. An inspiring story. So why do over 700 families buy their produce from a local organic farm? Why would we buy locally grown food? We are fortunate that we have choices. We can grow our own food during the summer, or encourage other local producers at the local outdoor market, or shop at our local grocery stores. So where does our food come from? If we take the time to examine the food we see in the large grocery stores, we find that much of the produce comes from far away. Nature works tirelessly on our behalf, providing us with the essential needs: water, food, clean air, medicine, and materials for clothing and shelter. Native peoples and past generations have tended to work with nature to ensure ongoing supply. However, our large agribusinesses have leaned towards profits rather than sustainability, unfortunately, to the detriment of soil structure and soil quality, thereby negatively affecting the nutritional value of our food as we deplete our soil of the necessary minerals to keep us healthy. Our health is also affected by traces of pesticides that are often left on our food. In addition, we contribute to the climate crisis as we choose food that has traveled from other continents. However, we have a role to play in reversing these negative effects. We can choose to grow our own food in our backyard, on our balcony, or in a community garden, or buy from local organic producers, thereby reducing the carbon footprint, avoiding pesticides, and hopefully having the benefit of soil rich in the necessary minerals nourished with compost. Local food is fresher, and as there are no middlemen, there are fewer steps, and therefore less chance of contamination. Community-supported agriculture builds connections between the farm and the community, sustaining each other in a mutually beneficial relationship. It allows us to see where our food comes from. It is ecologically sustainable with crop diversification, allowing for a strong and healthy ecosystem for flora, fauna, and fungi, and us. And it is economically sustainable. EcoWatch lists some more advantages of buying local produce. By supporting local farms, we create local jobs and local processing and distribution systems, thereby boosting local economy and building connected communities. Local food travels less distance to market than processed grocery store foods, therefore using less fuel and generating fewer greenhouse gases. And because of the shorter distribution chains, there is less food waste. Local food is fresher, healthier, and tastes better because it spends less time in transit from farm to plate, and therefore loses fewer nutrients and incurs less spoilage. Organic farms avoid pesticides and preservatives, and meats can be hormone-free. Local farms usually produce a diverse selection of vegetables, allowing for genetic diversity and reducing reliance on monoculture, which is an invitation to disease and often a detriment to the soils. By shopping locally, we can also avoid all the excess packaging we find in the grocery stores. Local produce and markets promote agrotourism and preserve farmland, avoiding urban sprawl. By choosing seasonal and local fruits and vegetables, or meat or fish that is produced or caught using sustainable methods, we are doing our part. It's a win-win situation. So see you at the local market. We're going to now do the World Food Day prayer. And if you're saying it along with me, if it's posted, if you could speak only very quietly underneath your mask. Creator of all that is, all that has ever been, and all that will ever come, in the season we know in the north as autumn, we offer gratitude for the cycle of the seasons. In this season, we begin to reap what we have sown, tended to, prayed over, and fretted on. In all of this, we know that you have been there, watching over your creation and all its creatures. We lament over crops that were lost this year to drought and hail and floods and frost, to lack of workers, to pandemic. We lament over crops that were never planted, where farmers could not access their land or do not have the privilege to acquire land. Help us to stand in solidarity with farmers whose harvests never came to yield. Help us to see land not as a resource to use, but as a gift to share. As the leaves begin to turn brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows, we begin to pull from the ground the fruit of our labor. The potatoes, squash, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, apples, pears, and more begin to fill our baskets. We give thanks. We know that these foods will sustain us through the winter. And I have too much kale if you need any. We give thanks for laborers that have come to harvest, workers from near and far, many who traveled to this land to find work. Sustainer, open our eyes to their sacrifice and help us to honor their gift. Creator, we are called back to remember our interconnectedness during this harvest season. Forgive us the times that we have been disconnected from our relations in our desire to take more than we should. Call us back into the fabric of creation so that we might live in the abundance of life. For all this and more, we give thanks. Amen. So please join us in the Voices United 520, We Plow the Fields. And again, keep your mask on and just humming. Thank you.
Back in the 70s, I read a book that had a profound influence on me called Diet for a Small Planet. It explained how much land was needed to raise beef cattle compared to how much grain could be grown on that same land to feed hungry people. I decided then and there that I had to change my diet to eat less meat. It was the only moral thing to do. My father, who worked for the Federal Department of Agriculture in beef cattle production, was very disappointed in me and my sisters, two of whom became vegetarian. And since the 70s, I have tried to include several meatless meals in my weekly menus. Sometimes it's a challenge to come up with new and interesting dishes, but now we have Google to help. I tell this story to illustrate how what we eat is a choice if we're lucky enough to be well off financially. But in fact, more than 40% of the world's population, or 3 billion people, cannot afford a healthy diet. And way too many people are starving. If all food crops in the world were fed directly to humans instead of animals, 7% more food would be added to the world's food supply, enough to feed 4 billion more people. It's 50 years since the original publication of Diet for a Small Planet, and it seems just as relevant today as it did then because of climate change and soil degradation. We've heard about Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, burning the Amazon to make more land for raising cattle. In fact, between August 2020 and July 2021, the Amazon rainforest lost over 10,000 square kilometers, or 13 times the size of New York City, mostly due to huge-scale farming and cattle ranching. We all know that there is an obesity epidemic in North America. Most of us overeat calories, protein, sugar, and processed foods. That is not healthy for us or for the planet. But what should we do about it? We should eat less meat and more whole grains, legumes, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. We should avoid processed foods shipped long distances, and foods heavy in refined sugars and saturated fats. This is easy to say, but harder to do if you're a young working mom or dad who haven't the time their grandparents had to prepare simple meals from scratch. Still, it would make a huge difference if we all attempted to make healthier choices at the grocery store or market. One simple way is to read the labels on the food we buy. The COVID-19 pandemic has made things harder for farmers, and millions of people need emergency food aid. The bottom line is, our agri-food system must change. As consumers, we can help this to happen by increasing our demand for sustainably produced, nutritious foods, and by choosing healthy options instead of heavily processed packaged foods, tempting as they might be. And since our food systems produce fibers like cotton and wool as well as food, we can also make wise choices when it comes to our clothing. Cotton grown sustainably would improve soil health and biodiversity, reduce the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and help farmers be more profitable. We can choose to support locally, socially responsible clothing brands, or to support local designers rather than companies run by cheap labor overseas. We can buy secondhand clothing and donate clothes we no longer wear to charity. Petit 24. We are in the privileged position of being able to make better choices for ourselves and for the world. So why not do it? After watching a link to the CBC interview of English farmer-author James Rebank, Michael was inspired to write a song to accompany his words, "Our land is like a home." As you listen to this, our offering, please reflect on how you can offer your time, talents, and resources to help this church, our community, and the world.
So I just want to say a few words to you about the experience because I don't have a microphone, but I think I'm far enough away that I can speak like this. They're dedicated microphones, so I won't be too loud. You know how we all harp on certain, most of us harp on certain topics, but certain things that everybody knows that we talk about, right? So I spend a lot of time in the forest walking, tremendous amount of time. And I have something I always harp on. I always get excited every time I see a pile of rocks. You know, there's a division where the land has been seen here at one point. And you see that there's maybe the two brothers or whatever, however the family divided up. They hear the land and the distribution all at the same time. And so just locally, so there's Hackney Rock, there's Parkway, and Oak, right? And they all have these rocks that you'll see going right through, but all around you, you've got these trees that are 8 years old, sometimes 100 years old, and then you've got these trees. So my wife is, I just drive enough probably because every single time I see one of those walls, I start to use that thinking. I wonder what it was like. I wonder when they did it. I wonder who it was. I wonder what they were thinking. I wonder if they were wealthy. How come there's no furniture anymore? What's the story? And I just go on and on. Every single time wherever we go, all the time. So this song is a little bit, it's about that. But wondering about all the history and the rich history in every way we'll find them. So I don't often find them a lot. Except the forest, I actually find them that I often they would in most cases. So today I rode my bicycle and I had nobody to talk to, but I drove by this here in Thursday. There are 2 buildings in a row that have big piles of forest rock. It's not rock from Mercury, it's not beautiful slabs or anything. It's just rock from Syria. And I nobody gets annoyed with my chatter with, I wonder how long ago this land was originally. And then when was it sold? And why is it only here? You drive the whole way along, you don't see very many, and then blah, 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 blah. So there you go. That's my introduction to the song. When I was writing the song, actually, very early on, I was going to start with "Our land is like a home." So I was thinking, I need to see the people in the church. Maybe I could see it as if our land, like the land of the church is on, and the land that we all live on. And that was my perspective as I started, because I had this text already. And then I thought, this text will find one. I can't change it that much. So I couldn't help myself. The second to last one is mine. Not good. And you'll listen or watch for it and see how I put my own little twist. There's too much to do with yours.
Like a home in a patchwork landscape of another poem, written by hundreds of people, those here and now, and those who've gone before. Each generation has universe of meaning, and if you can read it, it tells a complex truth. The land we farm on holds moments of beauty, of triumph and hopes and dreams. The land we farm on holds moments of heartbreak, of tears and schemes gone wrong. It tells of what is good and flawed, of people how in greed we destroy precious things. Precious things. Our land is like a home in a patchwork landscape of another poem written by hundreds of people, those here and now and those who've gone before. Each generation adds new layers of meaning, and if you can read it, it tells a complex tale. It tells of hard-working folk clinging on for generations to avoid being swept away by the giant wave of a stormy world of change. And yes, some were swept away. They lost their grip, but still cared for the land, trying hard to find their way home. Find their way home. Our land is like a poem in a patchwork landscape of another poem written by hundreds of people, those here and now and those who've gone before. Each generation adds new layers of meaning, and if you can read it, it tells a complex truth. The land we farm on, the land we stand on, our land is like a poem.
That was lovely. Thank you very much. So in addition to being a very mediocre slide turner, I'm also going to talk about, my part of the service is about food waste. And I'm going to illustrate this, starting out with the story of a tomato. On a cold autumn night, an overripe tomato sits in a garbage bag, which you have to imagine, beside a curb outside a grocery store in Montreal. A sticker on its side, "Grown in Mexico," hints at the long trajectory it took to the curb. A good starting point in this tomato story is 1994, when the US, Canada, and Mexico implemented the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA resulted in thousands of small farmers in Mexico being pushed off their land they had worked for centuries. And they had no option but to work on huge industrial farms that paid less than $10 a day. But that's a story for another day. This tomato was most likely picked by a poorly paid laborer on a huge Mexican tomato plantation. It would have been picked when it was green and then sent north in a truck. Although we might like to think of this tomato as a product of sun, soil, and water, embedded within it are fertilizers, pesticides, and all the energy it took to make them, as well as all the fossil fuels needed to drive tractors on the farm and then drive the trucks that brought the tomato to Canada. Although tomato seeds originated in Mexico, this tomato has been bred only to last and look pretty, and the side effects, which would be 62% less calcium and 30% less vitamin C, are not of interest to the industrial producers. But that's also a story for another day. When the tomato reaches our grocery store in Montreal, it is unpacked and put on the shelf, where it nestles with dozens of other tomatoes of different varieties, shapes, and prices. This tomato should be bought and happily consumed at the end of this story, but sadly it is not. Perhaps an employee spotted a blemish on our tomato while putting it on the shelf, and they kept hiding it at the bottom of the display. Perhaps the store ordered too many tomatoes that week. For whatever reason, our tomato came all the way from Mexico, through many hands and over many miles, to a garbage bag in Canada. A rather disturbing end to its story. And of course, this tomato could just as easily be a pineapple from Costa Rica, garlic from China, you know the rest. So I tell you this story to illustrate the problem of food waste. Around the world, about 30% of our food is lost or wasted. About half of that waste is food lost during harvest, storage, transportation, or transformation, that is, before it gets into a store, and the rest is wasted from the time the food gets to a store until we eat it. It all adds up to throwing out over 1 billion tons of food each year. And in North America, it represents about $1,600 per person per year. So that's a lot of food that doesn't make it to its expected destination. And why do we care? Because all the energy, the chemicals, the labor, the money that went into producing that food is also lost. The part of food waste that gets lost before it gets to a store, be it due to drought, mice in a storage facility, or a power failure causing a refrigeration unit to warm up, there is not much that we can do about that. But the food that's wasted between the store and our tummies, we can do something about that. If that tomato reaches our refrigerator, we can make sure that we eat it, make sure that it does not end up in the garbage or the compost heap. So here are some hot tips from the UN. Very practical advice, and I have to admit, I learned stuff. Plan your meals and make a grocery list. Ignore those deals where you buy more than you actually want. They're everywhere. The kind of deal where you get 2 for $5, and by doing so, you save 49 cents. But maybe you lose $2.50. So it's not, think twice. Number 2, store fruits and vegetables properly so they last longer. They mostly need to be kept cold. And if you don't have anywhere to keep them, only buy what you'll use in a week. And if it looks like they won't last, freeze them. I think smoothies were invented for this purpose. The other thing you can do is buy frozen fruits and vegetables. Surprisingly, they're often just as nutritious and more likely to be grown in Canada than fresh produce out of season. Number 3, refrigerator door is a few degrees warmer than the rest of the fridge. Don't store your milk there or anything else that goes off easily, like deli meats. Number 4, get creative with leftovers. My sister-in-law has a term for this called fridge lurk, and we would visit her and she'd say, for lunch, we're having fridge lurk, which meant we were going to look through the fridge and see what we could make out of whatever was in there. So wraps, soups, salads, whatever comes to your imagination. And number 5, when all else fails, compost. It's not the best solution, but it's better than putting food waste in the garbage. The other thing you can do is reflect on your meal before you eat it, for all the labor and energy that went into it, from farmers to cooks. So please join me as we conclude our service today. Let us give thanks for the blessings we have, for those who plant and weed and harvest and nurture their fields, so they will always be there to grow food, for those who transport and sell that food so that it reaches our homes safely. Let us say this grace together. As we eat our daily meals, remind us of hands that weed the fields and tend the livestock and haul the nets, hands that pack the boxes and load the trucks and stock the shelves, hands that work where we do not, like the very hands of God. For this and so much more, we are deeply thankful. Amen. And for their first live event together since the pandemic began, I introduce Eric and Jim playing The Farmer's Song by Murray McLaughlin.
Just before we start, it occurred to me just during the service that this song is about an old farmer, but it's kind of inspiring that all the pictures that we saw of farmers today or young farmers.
Dusty old farmer, working in your fields, hanging down over your tractor wheels. Sun beating down turns the red paint to orange, rusty old patches of steel. Farmer songs, our radio, just how these truck drivers in pain. Well, this is my way to say thanks for the meal. I hope there's no shortage of rain. Straw hat and old dirty Yankees, mopping a face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid from the city to you. Straw hat and old dirty hankies, mopping a face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid from the city to you. Banks are foreclosing, crops have gone dry, things just ain't like they used to be. Oh, your kids are out chasing that American dream, working in big factories. Now if I come by, you're out in the sun, but I wave at you just like rain. These days when everybody's taking so much, there's somebody giving back in. Straw hat and old dirty hankies, mopping a face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid from the city to you. Straw hats and old dirty hankies, mopping a face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid from the city to you. Straw hat and old dirty hankies, mopping a face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid from the city to you. Straw hat and old dirty hankies, mopping a face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid from the city to you.
Thanks to everybody for this service. Thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks to the several who are on Zoom, wherever you are. And just remember that we need to socially space as we make our ways out. Keep our masks on and socially space. So thanks again. We'll see you all next week.